Hello and welcome to the TECHunplugged VideoCast. I'm Max Mortillaro, and today I'm joined by our two friends from the Netherlands, Arjan Timmerman and Joep Pisker. Hello, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
So
how are you?
How are you guys doing?
Good. It's nice weather in the Netherlands, so yeah.
We have at least that.
We manage.
Arjan, it doesn't look like you're working at all.
No, working in the garden, that's it.
Yeah.
See, so we have a prime example of what the COVID-19 crisis has brought forward. We have two guys here working from the garden 24/7.
24
that I hope you're still sleeping in house or not sleeping in the tent somewhere.
in the garden, that's it.
Yeah, I set up a tent.
All right. Okay, guys. So we've been talking together about some great developments going on in industry. I know if great, but at least big things going on. So Arjan or Joep, do you want to get started on those topics?
Yeah, of course. So in times of crisis, it's always good to see that a couple of companies still get a lot of funding. So we've seen Cohesity get $250 million. I think Vast Data get 100 million or something like that. And I think Joep mentioned that HashiCorp also got 175 million. So yeah, that's really awesome to see that in days like this where a lot of is going on and a lot of companies are trying to keep everything afloat. There's still funding coming in from the people that have the money, and yeah, I'm kind of curious of what you think about these kind of funding rounds.
Well,
sorry.
So let me start by giving the HashiCorp example, right? I mean, 175 million. I think their evaluation is at 2 billion now.
Something like that. Yeah, I saw that.
Two and a half. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, my rationale for explaining this is everyone's working from home. People are using cloud services more and more and more. That means that configuring cloud resources, doing the multi-cloud thing, scaling up your infrastructure, using container schedulers, all those things, crisis or not, people need all of those things, right? So
yeah, I want to come back on the cloud thing a little bit further, but I do agree with you on that. Companies are really looking for how can I leverage what we have right now and make it even better for the foreseeable future, because nobody knows what is COVID-19 is going to do within the next couple of months. So yeah, companies are really looking at making sure that everything keeps running, and where they can, they want to leverage some of the cloud, maybe not all of it. So yeah, I agree on that one. But maybe Max has another point of view because he's in another country or looks at it from another perspective.
Well, I would say in a way, I'm not really surprised that HashiCorp is getting funded, and I've been looking a bit at what they do. We've been working together with Joep on putting together some articles about, I think, HashiCorp Sentinel on Amazic, for example. And what struck me with HashiCorp is that they're in that space of DevOps and orchestration, infrastructure as code and so on, but still there's a kind of consistency that radiates out of this organization, out of this company. They're building an ecosystem with various products, and all of the things tie in together, which is, I would say, and please don't get me wrong on that, it's kind of a rare thing in the world of DevOps, where people are building that thing here and building that thing there, and they're counting on developers to glue all the things together. And I think that, to me, it's HashiCorp feels as the kind of enterprise class next generation company, because they're not doing things the way old school companies were doing, where they're trying to build something, an extra layer on the cake, but they're really building that thing from the ground up. So I don't know, and you probably know, because you've been following that space closely. So you can tell me, well, if that kind of makes sense.
It does. I mean, HashiCorp is building products that kind of complement each other, right? It's not separate tools that don't have any integration. for example, you can deploy Vault clusters using Terraform, right? And it's a small example, but it shows that it is, it's a single portfolio of products that kind of help practitioners, engineers, cloud engineers do a specific thing, right? It is to help them do that whole multi-cloud in an easier way, because using Amazon's tools or using Azure's tools or using Google's tools to do cloud, that's kind of hard. You have to do the same thing 3 times or 2 times, depending on how many clouds you're in. And if you can use one tool to do all three, and then also do Alibaba in the future, or do IBM's cloud or Oracle's cloud, if anyone is ever going to use it. I mean, it makes sense from a practitioner standpoint. It makes their life easier, which in turn helps companies master multi-cloud, which helps them to go to market faster, which helps them get more revenue, build better products, whatever it is. So for companies that actually have a use case for multi-cloud, a company like HashiCorp brings immediate value because it frees up their engineers to kind of spend time on things that are more useful than doing the same toil over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it also makes sense perhaps to just make a quick parenthesis on multi-cloud, because there's a lot of vendors which seem to make multi-cloud like the alpha and omega of or like the ultimate quest of doing IT or running infrastructure, right? And the reality is that it's not quite like that, because uh, what you're saying is that these tools help to abstract the complexity behind that, but ultimately if you're running infrastructure, you always have this approach of you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but on the other hand, you don't want to have too much complexity and things too much spread out around. So maybe it's also one good way for organizations to seamlessly move from one platform to another. If they see, for example, that AWS is not fitting their requirements, they can very easily use this abstraction they've been building to put things over to Azure or to Google Cloud Platform, if that's still a thing, or whatever else. So that's just a quick parenthesis on that.
Yeah, and it's multi-cloud isn't just about does this cloud do what I need it to do? Because you can assume that most clouds will do most things by now. It is
Mhm.
also it is also a risk spreading strategy
I think
to.
that's much more.
Yeah, and to that point, I've seen Azure struggling in the last couple of weeks with a couple of their cloud resources. I mean, not all. It was very specifically to a single region, or maybe even more narrow than that. I'm not sure, but it goes to show. I mean, a cloud is just someone else's computer in this sense. It's still run, on top of servers that you need the capacity for. And if you see a sudden surge, being Azure, and suddenly you're running out of physical servers to put things on, you have a problem,
Yeah.
right? And so it shows that even the big hyperscale cloud vendors like Azure, like AWS, like Google, are not unlimited in their resources. And so spreading your application as an e-commerce platform, or a telepresence, a telecommunication system like the one we're using now, I mean, it makes sense to kind of run across multiple clouds.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to mention is, you have to be close to your users somehow, right? And if all of your users are closer to an Azure region and not as close to an AWS region, or the other way around, it makes sense to deploy to that region, right? It makes sense to deploy close to kind of where the users are. And from that aspect, multi-cloud makes sense too, because penetration of cloud data centers, cloud locations, isn't uniform across the world.
No, agreed. And yeah, like you already mentioned, you see even the big ones struggle from time to time. Even yeah, there's even been blackouts in certain regions. So maybe that was not during this crisis and all of that, but yeah, there's always a reason why you don't want to stick to one particular cloud for your main applications, the main things that you're doing. But one of the other things that I wanted to mention is what you guys are seeing from a cloud adoption perspective, because what I'm seeing is that from one side you can say, okay, a lot of customers are looking for, okay, but in certain for certain aspects I want to go to the cloud and I want to do it quicker because of all the things that have happened. From another perspective, some are saying, yeah, but I'm seeing that the cloud isn't the holy grail as everybody told it would be.
Yeah.
So I want to keep my data within my own data center for some of the applications that I want to keep really close to me. And yeah, so it's kind of okay. There's a lot of going on, and this crisis brings a lot of things into the light that yeah we thought of it before, but we didn't think of it being that important until now, because uh, one of the
So
companies I'm working with, they're just saying, you know what, we have been called a vital company. And with a vital company, we need to make sure that a disaster recovery is up and running if something happens to the main data center.
Mhm.
So they're looking into cloud much earlier now because they have to. So that's what I'm seeing, but maybe it's other on your end. So I would
I
like to
think
know.
it really depends. I mean, my perspective is that of imagine that of multinational corporations which are operating in regulated environments. So it's already, corporation, regulated environment is already like two flags, which says that this is not going to be the main use case. But there are big companies in that space, and these companies have to abide to certain regulations. And usually they are much more, let's say, adverse to risk than regular organizations, simply because if shit hits the fan, it's going to go real bad. And those companies, they want to preserve their reputation, they want to preserve their image to the public, they want to make sure that they are not hit by regulators and so on. So there are already cloud initiatives where some workloads are already being classified to be cloud first, such the same way as we had virtualization first 5, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, based on where the organization was. So uh, there are cloud first strategies, but not all the workloads can go there because of data classification, because of specific kind of workloads, because of the sensitivity and the impact that certain workloads or certain application may have overall. Think about SOX regulations for the banking industry. Think about so Sarbanes-Oxley. You can think about healthcare regulations and so on. So all of these things, they put an extra scrutiny. And while it is technically possible to run workloads on the cloud, there is no technical problem beyond that. The organization may want to think twice about what's going to happen. We've seen cases where some devs or some organization that were using publicly available buckets because they were not secured properly. So that's the typical risk. It's stupid, but it keeps happening.
Don't you think that is not necessarily because of technology or because of regulations and
It's never about
um,
technology.
but isn't this about another aspect that I think is overlooked often, um, which is not many people will want to work for the big enterprise, like the examples you two gave. It's not sexy to work for a vital company that Arjen's describing. It may not be sexy to work for a big healthcare provider, or name any example. It's sexy to work for a cloud native startup doing cool stuff with cloud resources. And so to that point, I think it's hard for companies like the ones you described to get the right people with the right knowledge and the right skills to actually show up, be there, work
I
there.
think it's even beyond, even I was going to that. It's even beyond the technical prowess, the ability of people to do that. It's about having the uh, the perseverance, the willingness to convince the organization, because you always have a top-down approach where you get the management, executive management, to say, okay, we're in a phase where cloud is commonplace now, so we will compare, pricing, of getting on-premises infrastructure, and all the stack beyond that are getting things to cloud. So you get a price comparison. But then you need, when you go down there, you need to convince other, segments or people. So your CIO or your CTO can say, okay, let's go to the cloud. Your CISO can say something different. You can say, no, there's a risk here. People from legal can come in, legal counsel to the executive committee can go there and say, no, we're not going to do that. So if you're on the way down, my experience has been, if you're going from the bottom all the way up, you're going to find more friction to impose adoption of these technologies. If it's going the other way, from the bottom down, from the top down, then it works easier. So, but again, it's not a technology problem. It's really about people and having the willingness. And before handing over, I think that's why what's happening these days with this pandemic is really interesting and important, is that it is forcing organizations to rethink their whole strategies.
Yeah,
I can tell you that.
I totally agree.
I'm in a project which is getting delayed because people can't access the data center because we cannot send resources to do configuration work on premises and all. And you know what? If we were running on the cloud, it may have been more expensive. If you run workloads 24/7, always turn on instances. But the thing is, there will be no problem such as that. You will just spin up the instances and do everything through Terraform or through AWS or whatever.
True.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's kind of that's something, you were talking about that, Ariane, before, which is we're going to be the winners, we're going to be the losers. So it's early to say that all of the infrastructure companies are going to be losers, because ultimately you need to run your infrastructure somewhere, you need hardware and so on. But what plays for sure is that it plays a lot the game of the big public cloud providers. I mean, that's my feeling of that.
Yeah. I mean, public cloud providers, but even I spoke to a Dutch company recently, and they do hosting for basically for SaaS companies, right? So they are a private cloud offering for SaaS companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they have seen pretty much all of their clients skyrocket, except for, the usual ones that have issues right now. Like, one is a daycare provider. I think they kind of see no traction for their websites at all. But, all of the other ones, all of the SaaS providers are booming, which means this hoster is skyrocketing as well. And so they have, like Azure, capacity issues to keep all of their clients running, and they're all happy, and they're all, and so I think everyone who is remotely in the space of offering services over the internet right now is going to be a short-term winner, but that's really limited to being short-term, because once the physical world opens up, people still enjoy shopping for clothes physically more than online shopping, right? But I think there's a couple of things that change dramatically over the next couple of months. One of which I think will be groceries, like grocery shopping online. Once people made the switch to doing it online, they're used to it. They see the advantages, and I think it's gonna stick. What do you guys think?
Oh, I can comment to that, because I've been shopping online for quite a long time. So I've been in Czech Republic. We have one of the providers, which is called Rohlik.cz, which is unpronounceable if you want to say that in English. But I've been switching to that very early on, because I don't have time to go to the shop and spend hours in a queue and running through a predefined path, like if I was a rat mouse, to select products and be triggered by all sort of things. I didn't want to go and select my stuff. And what struck me is, as soon as the first restrictions were announced by the government, I mean, that was instant. I mean, everything went totally saturated. We were getting HTTPs 502s and things of this kind all over the place. It actually, the first day I wanted to order, I gave up. I resumed 2 days after, and I was opening multiple tabs and hitting Control R all the time, just to make sure that what I was clicking was actually reflecting. I managed to make my order, and when I paid, there was again a 502. So I don't know if I payment made it through. I got eventually a mail, and I got delivered. But what this shows is that if these organizations, those grocery shops or whatever, those which were running on the cloud and which had the proper infrastructure behind, because running VMs on the cloud is one thing, but having cloud native application which you can really scale up, and that goes to the topic of Kubernetes and spinning containers or whatever you want to call that, then those which had this flexibility, they could very easily ramp up and they would have a much more stable platform. So here again, it's not just about the product or the image you're giving out, but the technology you're using actually directly impact customers. Because if you're in a crisis like that and you have a rush of customers, well, if your site doesn't work, well, sorry, I'm just gonna go check the other site and that's it.
Yeah.
So it's been my experience. I
Yeah.
don't know for you,
Go ahead, Arjen.
No, I totally agree. Although we're still doing the physical part of it. That's mainly, I think, because the supermarket is literally 50 meters from here, so just walk over and get our groceries. But what we did is that we said, okay, we're not going, because normally you would just, if you miss something or there's something not here, you would go in and grab it and probably get 2 or 3 or 4 more things because you're just there, so just pick that up as well. But actually we're doing the groceries for my mom and dad also, because they live in the same village, and they're older people, so we told them, just don't go there, we'll do it for you. But we're actually already talking about, okay, but what we can do is that we order it online and just pick it up at the supermarket, pick it up, bring, that is what is for my mom and dad, bring it to them, pick up what for us, and that's it. But for now, we're sticking to just going to the supermarket. But if you're in a crisis like this, you're seeing that people just cannot hold to what the government is claiming as being safe for everybody. So yeah, I really think that if I was living in the city or not near the supermarket, I would probably go to the online as well, because it's so much easier. You get everything you want. You don't have the urge to get other stuff because you're hungry or whatever, and you see something and grab it anyhow. So yeah, I think it's probably going to stick around, and even there, like Max already mentioned, there will be winners and there will be losers in that space as well.
The thing is also, I think that it's the logical continuation of online shops, where but you don't necessarily need to be big to do something online. You can be a small shop or a specialized shop and be very successful online. It all goes down to what you're selling and what is the value you're adding. If it is about commodity stuff, so what I wanted to say is that I'm not a total geek at the point that I'm just going to do my grocery online so I can spend time, paste it on my screen. I do love to go shop to a market to get fresh grocery, fresh produce, but it's two different things. If I want to shop commodity stuff like, toilet paper rolls by the hundreds or pasta or whatever, I can get that online because it's a no-brainer. I click, I get it. I don't have a sentimental relationship with those products. However, if I want to go buy fresh fruit or fresh vegetables or cheese or things of this kind, or bread, even if we're baking at home, I want to go there, I want to speak with the guy who's selling it, I want to smell it, taste it and all, so it's two different things. And I think we're going to see that, I guess, in the future. I mean, based on what restrictions are going to be there, but we're still going to see that people may go online for the fast commodity thing they need, and they will maybe continue going to their local shop for whatever they need. Or so it's not that you have losers and winners. I mean, it's just maybe going to rebalance. But
well, I kind of wonder about like the artisanal, smaller, the specialty shop.
Yeah, but
are they ever gonna make the switch to doing online as well? And I'm not saying go online completely and exclusively, but just add an online part to this.
They probably will, or they probably will, those that can do it, the other ones will probably just disappear, I guess, in the end. And how long that will take, that, yeah, I don't know. But I think, like Max already mentioned, there's always the things that you think, okay, but if I'm going to do a big barbecue and I want some really good meat, am I going to order that online, or am I going to a very specialized butcher in the neighborhood that I will say, okay, you know what, I really want this and I want that and I want to see it, and that are the things that, but even they could go online and sell stuff online, but I think they really want to keep being with their customers as well. I think a lot of those smaller shops are really there because they want to have the look and feel with the customer. That's something they really appreciate, and the customer really appreciates that as well. So I think they will be there for many, many, many years, but they will adapt to online stuff as well, probably.
What we're
Let's hope
seeing
so.
what we're seeing is primarily these smaller shops are more using some tools, some online tools, but primarily social media platforms. I think Instagram, for example, is a big thing in Czech Republic. Almost all the shops, whatever they're selling, whether they're selling masks or they're selling groceries or they're selling accessories, whatever, they all are present on Instagram. Then the thing is also about commodity. What is commodity? To you, it's one thing. To me, it's something else. You might want, I got a bike for one of my kids, the youngest one. I got it on Decathlon. I got it online because we already have two bikes of the same kind. We know that it's going to do the job, and I'm not going to spend days thinking about that. He's going to grow up. We'll sell it to someone else. We'll get something better. No, my wife needs a bike. It's a whole different story because she's picky, first of all, and I do appreciate her for that. And she wants to see the thing. So for me, the bike for a kid is a commodity. For her, it's not a commodity. So that's why I think that we're still always going to have this kind of physical
Yeah.
brick and mortar
Yeah.
presence, but we're going to see it for specialized things and not for banalities such as buying canned groceries or toilet paper or things of this kind.
Toilet paper, yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So
You can buy them with a truckload.
So let's go to a conclusion here. Who's going to be the winner? Let's try and find that.
Well, the winners are going to be the cloud providers, which are going to sell this capacity, I guess.
Yeah, and the whole ecosystem around it is going to win for sure.
Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was a big turnaround to get back to the question.
So so who's going to be the losers? I mean, is it going to be anyone selling on-prem hardware?
Well, if you're expanding capacity on the cloud because for whatever reason, then there's no real loser, right? But still, there is a loser because if you have a sum of money and you're saying I'll put 60% on the cloud and 40% on premises, then that 60% is a loss for those providers which are selling on-premises infrastructure. So there's still going to be a loser, and I think that we're probably going to continue seeing that trend where on-premises infrastructure sales are going to probably keep going on a slope down. The question is how this crisis, how this pandemic is going to impact that. But ultimately, some of these vendors are maybe selling to cloud providers. Not everything, of course, because they're building their own stuff. But for me, I don't see that going so nicely for on-premises infrastructure providers, except, and it brings us to to what we were talking about investments, except for those which are operating in the secondary data space, because there is continuous growing demand for that, and there it's a slightly different conversation because the data is accumulating. You have this data gravity problem with that, and you have to think about, am I going to keep paying for this never-ending space which is growing? Is it a good strategy to just put everything which is unstructured object file, whatever, secondary data? Does it make sense to push everything to S3? Because you put things in there, but you ultimately don't have a control on the price. So if they decide to hike the prices up when you're stuck in there and you can do anything, then that's a problem. So that's why you have some organizations which are implementing several tiered strategies where they're archiving the data, pushing it to Glacier or to cold storage or ultra cold storage. And that's why organizations such as Cohesity getting investments, to me, it makes sense. I mean, for me, it's Cohesity has been a no-brainer for a long time. I mean, at least talking personally. Vast data is an interesting one as well. I mean, they're doing things slightly differently, but the way they're handling QLC 3D NAND with 3D crosspoint is really interesting. So I don't know what you guys think about Cohesity, for example.
Yeah, I think Cohesity really great. I think Fast is one of those companies where I really think that's one of the big winners for me is the big data. The big data industry is really going to boom from this because there's so much data coming in right now that needs to be crunched and that needs to be put into the clouds and yeah, really being leveraged for everything that it holds. So big data is one of the big winners for me. One of the, or not one of the losers, but the big losers are the companies that are inflexible for doing cloud. If you're not able, or an application or your application is not able to do the stuff it needs to do and give a perspective into being cloud enabled or at least cloud able, I think you're the big loser in this. You will be gone in less than a year, maybe even sooner.
Bold statement.
I mean, it comes maybe down to the perspective. What I can see, for example, is that if you're using mainstream applications, some of them can be refactored to run on the cloud and so on. But in some cases, some of the organizations, that's especially true for regulated organizations, sometimes you're stuck because by one or two or three vendors. That's maybe not the case for all of the systems, but you have certain systems, some critical systems such as MES systems in some production facilities. And usually the vendors, the companies which are making those systems, they are very inflexible about their products, about implementing new features, about licensing and so on. I mean, trust me, it's not even about being cloud native. It's about, getting rid of a freaking USB dongle for licensing from time to time, So if you're talking about Kubernetes and cloud and stuff like that, it's like, wow.
But I don't mean those ones, because I totally understand that technical automation is something really different from all the applications that we have to make sure that we can Office 365 or whatever. Everything that can go to a SaaS offering needs to offer those kinds of cloud native things, and if they don't, they will soon die. Absolutely. Because
but let me give you another example. So I used to work for a supermarket here in the Netherlands with a big online presence, at least with a major push to become bigger, right? To get market share, to increase their revenue, to decrease their loss, all that stuff. And they were making big strides in their e-commerce technology landscape, right?
yeah,
They went to cloud, they did microservices, they attracted the right developers, they were ticking a lot of the boxes. But in the end, this is a big logistical operation. And one of the limiting factors, at least for the supermarket, was their SAP implementation. So whatever they did on the e-commerce side was all, fine. That kind of worked well or well enough. No real big remarks there, except that if you wanted to be, twice as large, you didn't have to spend much time in fixing the e-commerce stuff because that was already in the process of becoming cloud native, scalable, blah, blah, blah. But it was an issue that their backend just didn't scale along with it. And that was the major problem.
Yep.
And there's no way you're going to do, an SAP migration to something flexible, whatever it is, right? If it's cloud or going to I don't know, a service provider that helps you out, or whatever it is you're going to do.
Yep.
That's that's a 10-year project, maybe longer, right? You just don't do that, something like that. And I think to your point, Arjen, this is a long way of saying I agree with you. The companies that are able to do this, even in the time frames of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, the companies that are able to restructure their core processes to be more flexible, to be adaptive, to be cloud native for some part, I
Yep.
think those are going to be the winners because they will be able to adjust to new realities quicker.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, in general, I would say that if it comes to software, there's always much more flexibility in terms of refactoring. Of course, it depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about peripheral applications or mainstream stuff, it's not a problem. If you're talking about core systems which were implemented 20, 30 years ago, then you have a bigger problem on your hands. But it's nothing that cannot be kind of sorted out if it's purely on software. If you're an infrastructure provider and you're providing hardware platforms and services, well, your problem is quite different because if you're basing yourselves on proven or old architectures, then you need to re-architect what you're offering for the cloud. And the question is, does it even make sense to re-architect what you have for the cloud?
Yep.
Does it make sense to run something if you already have a service running there? So it makes sense if you want to expand what you have on premises and you want to have these seamless data flows, migrations, copy, snapshot, whatever you want to call that. But if it is just to take something and to reinvent the wheel on the other side when you're already similar solutions,
Yep.
there may be hard to say.
Agreed.
So being flexible where
Yes.
possible.
Flexible.
That doesn't mean sitting in the sun all day, Arjen. Come on.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'll do my yoga in the sun as well then.
And the last news was our friends from Vast Data, which got $100 million in funding as well.
Yep.
So that's pretty good news for them, especially in these times.
Yep.
That secures them with some cash to go through the turbulences, at least for the next few months ahead. I mean, next year ahead, maybe 1-2 years. Don't know what their burn rate is, but seems that they're quite happy about the news.
Yep.
So what do you guys think about that? Did you guys were at the presentation we had with Vast Data? I know one of you was there, but I cannot remember whom, thanks to my friend Alzheimer.
Well, maybe I have Alzheimer's too, but I don't think I was there.
Yeah.
I think you were there alone, but I was online and I had some briefings with them afterwards as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great platform, but like I already mentioned, they're working in a niche, and I think that niche has a lot of potential because of what I already mentioned. So I really feel that giving them the 100 million in, I think it's the C round or something like that, and also putting them at almost 2 billion or something at that cap. I think it's really good. It shows the potential for them to really grow into one of the bigger companies that really leverage the NVMe stacks that they offer, and they're doing great. So yeah, I asked them last time I spoke with them if they really have business in EMEA right now, and they said they didn't have that much, so they really focus on the US market for now. Yeah, it will be interesting to see when they come into the EMEA market as well.
One interesting thing with Vast Data is that the solution they're selling is really optimized for providing very large capacity at a very competitive price placement. If you compare what you get with TLC and so on, it's brand new, built on 3D Crosspoint and QLC 3D NAND. And I think when we spoke with Howard Marks, he was explaining that they are targeting to specific customers, and they they're selling very large capacities, and therefore the deal size they're having for that is also something totally different. They're not selling. I'm not saying that it cannot be commodity, but they are selling a certain volume, which makes the deal or the let's say the economic viability of the organization maybe more perennial or more stable than if you were selling basic infrastructure, which is
Yeah.
going to keep declining. So maybe
Yeah,
that's
true. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, yeah, we need to see when it comes over here. I think they have a great opportunity in the US market. What they're doing is awesome. But yeah, it's from my perspective, it's something that is really into data crunching, a lot of data that is coming from lab technology, big data, that kind of stuff. That's what they're really good at. And yeah, there will be a lot of that going on in the next couple of years. So I think they will do really, really good.
So it looks like we're looking a bit at kind of I don't know if the decline of standard on-premises infrastructure is not going to get really accelerated by this pandemic, because some organizations, some companies are going to go out of business. Unfortunately, that's going to happen. And these guys, well, they won't need infrastructure anymore. But for those which are still in business and which are going to continue being in business, and those which need to continue, expanding their infrastructure and make those investments, well, right now they have the choice of everybody's confined in most countries. So it's more or less lax based on where you're based, on your location. But you have the choice of either I spin up something in the cloud, or I place a PO, or I consult with a pre-sales consultant, and then they need to create a design, and you're going to spend, if you already know what you want, you're talking about 3-4 weeks lead time, usually 6 weeks lead time if it's a bigger infrastructure, and then you need somebody to install that. So at the very least, you're talking about getting something in hours, or maybe even a couple days, based on how tech savvy you are with cloud infrastructures or public clouds, and 6 weeks or 8 weeks on the other side. If you're lucky, if the thing gets shipped, if you don't have a logistic supply chain problem, and so on. So, I mean, unless you need something very specialized, well, it depends how patient you are, how much you're going to invest. I mean, I can
Well,
talk from.
I love your point. I mean, what you're saying is commodity hardware is on the decline anyway, and with all of the associated issues with physical hardware, um, it's going to decline. It's going to decline anyway, and it's going to decline even harder because of the physical limitations we have right now. But I think I agree with that point. I also agree with the other point is specialized hardware will always be a thing people need, right? Like Arjen said, the very specific use cases for massive big data lakes that need to be crunched. That's not something people are going to do in cloud. And there's a lot of very specific use cases that I think will live on beyond the commodity of public cloud, because for the most part public cloud is whatever we think is commodity will probably be available in a public cloud, because it's a mass market commodity offering. And so I think there's always going to be a need for on-prem hardware or on-prem solutions, including software, but they are going to be more and more niche. As simple as that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's a good conclusion to the topic. Absolutely agree.
Yep. Okay. I think that's a good ending as well.
Absolutely. I think that was a pretty good discussion. So let's
So we
talk
can
here.
now go back outside into the sun.
Yeah. Which sun? Thank you,
Tomorrow is another
guys.
day.
Thank you for having a good discussion again. Let's
Thank
do
you
this.
all.
Let's do this again soon in the
Thank you.
sun.
Thanks, Arjen. Thanks, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.